In a world of giants, it takes a special kind of strength to stand tall and be heard. Join us as we tell the epic stories of modern-day titans who fought for their dreams against impossible odds. Subscribe today and find the titan living within yourself.
On a Tuesday morning in March, my daughter called to tell me she and her husband had just transferred my entire retirement account into their new business. She said it so casually, like she was telling me about the weather in Tampa. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I told her congratulations and hung up the phone. What my daughter didn't know was that the account she had just emptied wasn't my retirement fund at all. My name is Margaret Ann Calloway. I'm 63 years old, and I have lived in Clearwater, Florida for the last 14 years, ever since my husband Dennis passed from a heart attack the week before Christmas in 2009. People who see me at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, buying tomatoes and making small talk with the vendor who sells honey, see a retired school teacher with reading glasses on a beaded chain and sensible shoes. They see someone who brings casseroles to sick neighbors and volunteers at the library 2 afternoons a week, gentle, unhurried, easy to underestimate. What they don't see is that before I became a middle school English teacher in 1991, I spent 8 years working as a paralegal at a financial litigation firm in Atlanta. I know what fraudulent transfers look like. I understand the difference between a durable power of attorney and a limited one. I have read enough forged documents to recognize the particular quality of desperation in signatures obtained under pressure. I left that work when my daughter Claire was born because I wanted to be present for her childhood, and I never regretted it. But I never forgot what I learned either. You don't forget that kind of education. It lives in you like a second set of eyes. My daughter Claire is 34. Her husband is a man named Brandon Price, 40 years old, who has the kind of confidence that functions as a substitute for competence. He has launched 4 businesses in 6 years: a meal prep service, an online furniture resale platform, a short-term rental management company, and most recently, a wellness investment fund that I understood even less after he explained it than before. Claire met him at a rooftop party in Nashville 6 years ago and married him 11 months later at an outdoor ceremony in the Smoky Mountains that cost $40,000, which Dennis's life insurance helped pay for. I want to be fair to Claire. She is not a bad person. She is a woman who loves her husband more than she trusts her own instincts, and that gap between love and judgment has always frightened me. But I am getting ahead of myself. It started 14 months before that phone call in January of the previous year. Claire drove down from Nashville to spend a long weekend with me, which was unusual enough that I noticed. She arrived with overnight bags and a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, and a particular brightness in her eyes that I recognized as the look she gets when she has rehearsed something. We had dinner on the back porch. The air was warm for January, even by Florida standards. After the wine was poured and the chicken was mostly gone, Claire set her fork down and looked at me with that rehearsed expression. "Mom, I've been thinking. You're managing a lot of accounts on your own. The investment account, the savings, the property tax on the house. Brandon and I just want to make sure everything is organized for you." I told her I had been managing my own finances without incident for 14 years. She said she knew that. She said it wasn't about capability. She said it was about peace of mind. Hers, not mine. I asked what specifically she was suggesting. She suggested I add her as a joint account holder on my primary brokerage account, just so she could see the statements, just so there was someone keeping an eye on things in case something happened to me. I told her I would think about it. 2 months later, in March, I agreed. Not to joint ownership, but to adding Claire as a view-only authorized user on one account, my secondary account, the one I kept specifically for short-term expenses and small investments. It held about $19,000 at the time. My primary retirement account, which held $312,000 accumulated over 30 years of teaching and careful saving, remained entirely separate and entirely mine. Claire did not know it existed under a different institution. Dennis and I had opened it before we moved to Florida, and I had never mentioned it to her because there had never been a reason to. That is the detail my daughter would later forget, or perhaps never fully considered in the first place. I noticed the shift in Brandon over the following months. He started joining Claire's Sunday calls with me, which he had never done before. He asked questions about my house, how much I thought it might be worth, whether I had considered downsizing. He mentioned once, with a careful casualness that I recognized immediately as performance, that the Clearwater real estate market was remarkable right now, that properties like mine were moving fast. I told him I had no plans to move. He nodded pleasantly and changed the subject. In September, Claire called to tell me that Brandon's wellness investment fund had attracted its first significant outside investor. She was luminous with excitement. She said this was finally the one. She said she believed in him completely. I said I was glad she was happy. In October, I got sick, a sinus infection that turned into bronchitis that turned into something the urgent care physician called a significant lower respiratory event that landed me in Morton Plant Hospital for 5 days. I was not in danger of dying, but I was genuinely miserable, and my fever reached 102 for 2 of those days. Claire flew down on the second day. I was grateful to see her face. On the 4th day, I have a memory, not entirely clear but present, of signing something. Claire was at my bedside with a notary, a young man with a laminated badge I didn't examine closely. She said these were healthcare proxy forms, standard paperwork the hospital required. She said I had already been meant to sign them before the admission, and the paperwork had just caught up. My head was full of medication, and my eyes didn't want to focus. I signed where she pointed. That was the moment I should have stopped. I know that now, with the kind of clarity that only arrives after the damage is done. The call came on a Tuesday in early March, 4 months after my hospital stay. I was at my kitchen table drinking coffee and reading, which is my habit. My phone showed Claire's name. Mom, good news. Brandon's fund is moving forward. We need capital to secure the operating license, and we've taken care of it. I asked her what she meant by taking care of it. She said they had transferred the funds from my investment account. I set my coffee cup down. I asked her which account she was referring to. She named the secondary account, the one she had view access to. She said the power of attorney I signed in a hospital authorized the transfer. She said it was $240,000. I did the math instantly. That was more than 12 times what that account held. Claire, I said, that account has $19,000. A pause. No, Mom. The retirement account. The Fidelity one. I kept my voice very even. I don't have a Fidelity account. Another pause. Longer this time. The document said Fidelity. Brandon's attorney found it through your social security number. I sat quietly for a moment. My daughter and her husband had used a power of attorney I had signed while sick and confused, obtained through a notary I could not clearly remember, to locate and drain an account Claire didn't know existed. How much did you take? I asked. $240,000. Mom, this is an investment. You'll get it back with returns. Brandon's attorney structured it. Have a good day, Claire. I hung up. I want to describe what I felt in that moment, because it is important to understand that it was not panic. It was something colder and more purposeful than panic. It was the feeling I used to get at the litigation firm when I read through a financial document and found the exact place where the fraud lived. A kind of narrowing focus, like adjusting a lens. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. My Fidelity account showed a 0 balance. The transaction history showed a single wire transfer dated 2 days prior for $242,618, transferred to an account under the business name Price Wellness Capital Partners, LLC. I opened a new document and began writing. At the top, I typed, Timeline of Financial Fraud, Claire Ann Calloway Price and Brandon David Price. And then I started from the beginning, the January dinner, the account access, the hospital visit, the notary, the signature. By 8 that morning, I had called 3 people. The first was my attorney, a woman named Susan Garland, who I had retained for Dennis's estate and kept on retainer ever since, which tells you something about my general level of preparedness. Susan listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Margaret, this is elder financial abuse. It's a felony in Florida. I need you in my office at noon. The second call was to Fidelity's fraud division, where a representative named Terrence walked me through the flagging process. I told him I had not authorized the transfer. I told him I believed the power of attorney was fraudulently obtained. He opened an investigation and flagged the wire transfer for review. The third call was to my neighbor and closest friend, a woman named Joyce Pemberton, who is 71 and retired from 40 years as a county court clerk, and who has never once in her life been surprised by what human beings are capable of doing to each other. I told her what had happened. She was silent for a moment, and then she said, I'll bring coffee. We're going to organize your documents. At noon, I sat in Susan Garland's office on Court Street. Susan is 57, sharp-featured and unhurried in the way that genuinely experienced attorneys tend to be. She reviewed the documents I had brought. She pulled up the power of attorney on her screen and studied it for a long time. "Margaret," she said, "this is a general durable power of attorney. It's broad. But the notarization date is October 14th. Do you have your hospital admission records?" I did. I had brought them. She compared the dates. "You were admitted October 9th. You were discharged October 14th. The document is notarized on the same day as your discharge." "I was still there on the 14th, I said. "I didn't leave until 4 in the afternoon." "What time is the notarization stamped?" I looked. 9:17 in the morning. Susan looked at me steadily. "We need to find that notary." We did find him, within 48 hours. His name was Devin Alcott, and his notary commission had expired the previous June. He was not a licensed notary in the state of Florida at the time he witnessed my signature. Any document he notarized after June was legally invalid. More importantly, he had been hired through Brandon's attorney. We knew this because Devin Alcott, when contacted by Susan's investigator, was cooperative to a degree that suggested he had not fully understood what he was participating in and wanted very much to get ahead of it. Susan filed the complaint with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office on a Thursday. The detective assigned to the case was a woman named Rita Okafor, who had worked economic crimes for 11 years, and who, when I laid out my documentation, said it was one of the more organized elder fraud presentations she had seen. I told her I used to work in litigation. She nodded as if that explained everything. On Friday, Fidelity confirmed they were holding the wired transfer in a compliance review. The funds had not yet cleared into Price Wellness Capital Partners LLC because a matching flag on Brandon's business account had also triggered a separate review. We had moved quickly enough. Claire called me 4 times between Tuesday and Friday. I did not answer. On Saturday morning, she appeared at my front door with Brandon beside her. I let them in because I wanted to see exactly what they would say. Claire looked like she had not slept. Brandon looked exactly like himself, which is to say he looked like a man making continuous calculations. "Mom, we need to talk about this," Claire said. "Brandon's attorney says the transfer was fully authorized. The POA is valid. We didn't do anything wrong." I sat down in the armchair across from the couch where they had both settled. "Devin Alcott's commission expired last June," I said. "The document he notarized is invalid." Brandon leaned forward. His voice shifted into something patient and slightly condescending that I suspected he used in business meetings. "Margaret, I understand you're upset. But this was an investment, not a theft. You're going to benefit from this. You found my account through my social security number without my knowledge," I said. "You obtained my signature while I was ill and medicated using an unlicensed notary. You transferred $240,000 without a valid authorization. What part of that would you like to describe as an investment?" Claire's face had gone a color I had never seen on her before. "Mom," she said quietly. "Did you already talk to an attorney?" "Claire, I called my attorney the morning you told me. I called Fidelity. I called the sheriff's office. There is an active investigation." Brandon stood up. His patient voice was gone. "You reported your own daughter to the police." "I reported a fraudulent transfer to the police," I said. "My daughter's name appears in that report because her name is on the power of attorney." "This is insane," Brandon said. "We are trying to build something. We needed capital. You have more than enough sitting in accounts doing nothing." "It was doing something," I said. "It was keeping me housed and fed for the rest of my life." He said several other things. He said I was being vindictive. He said I had never believed in Claire's happiness. He said that if I pressed this, I would destroy my relationship with my daughter permanently, and that was my choice to make. But I should understand what I was choosing. He said elderly people made financial decisions they later regretted all the time and that courts were familiar with that pattern. That last part was the threat, and we both knew it. I looked at my daughter during all of this. Claire sat on my couch with her hands in her lap, and she did not speak, but twice, very briefly, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not quite apology. Something more complicated than that. "You need to leave," I said. "Both of you, now." Brandon left first, still talking. Claire stopped in the doorway and turned back. "Mom," she said. Her voice was stripped of the performance that had been in it since January of last year. "I didn't know about the notary. I looked at my daughter. I know you didn't. That's why your name may still be removable from the criminal complaint. But that depends entirely on what you do next. She left. I sat in my armchair for a long time before I called Joyce. That evening, Joyce came over with wine and her formidable organizational instincts, and we sorted every piece of documentation into labeled folders: bank records, hospital records, the power of attorney, Devin Alcott's commission status, Susan's correspondence with Fidelity, the detective's case number. 3 complete sets. Do you think Claire knew the full extent of it? Joyce asked. I think she knew they were using my accounts, I said. I think she told herself it was an investment and let herself believe the paperwork was legitimate because she wanted to. That's a kind reading. She's my daughter, I said. I'm allowed a kind reading. What I didn't tell Joyce that evening was that 2 days before Claire's visit, I had received a phone call from a woman named Donna Marsh, who identified herself as a former administrative contractor with Price Wellness Capital Partners. She said she had left the company 3 months earlier and that there were things I should know. What Donna told me took 45 minutes and a second cup of coffee to fully absorb. Brandon Price had no outside investor. The luminous announcement Claire had made in September was fabricated. The significant outside investor was a figure Brandon had invented to present to Claire and to prospective clients to create the appearance of validation. The fund had never been properly registered with the Florida Office of Financial Regulation. Devin Alcott was the third notary Brandon had used in the past 18 months for various document signings, none of which had been properly disclosed to the signatories. And Brandon had a first wife, married at 26, divorced at 30, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who had filed a civil suit against him in 2010 for fraudulent transfer of marital assets. The suit had been settled confidentially. Claire did not know about the first wife. I knew that the information about the first wife was not my evidence to use strategically, but I also knew that my daughter was standing at the edge of something she could not fully see from where she was standing. And I had a decision to make about whether to show her the view. I called Claire the following Thursday, 10 days after she had appeared at my door with Brandon. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting. I told her I needed to see her alone, without Brandon. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said she would drive down on Saturday. She arrived looking like the weight of the past 2 weeks had redistributed itself somewhere just behind her eyes. We sat at the kitchen table. I made tea. I put Donna Marsh's information in front of her in a plain folder. I'm not showing you this to hurt you, I said. I'm showing you because you have a right to the full picture before you decide which side of this you're standing on. Claire opened the folder. She read slowly. I watched her face move through stages I recognized from watching jurors in the cases I had worked in Atlanta. Confusion, resistance, recalculation, and then something quieter and much more damaging. Recognition, the first wife, the unregistered fund, the fabricated investor. She closed the folder. She did not speak for a long time. How long have you known? 10 days. You didn't tell me immediately. I needed to know whether you already knew. Claire looked up at me. I didn't know, Mom. I swear to you I didn't know any of it. I believe you, I said. And that's the only reason we're having this conversation instead of me letting the investigation run its course with your name still fully attached. What do I need to do? You need to tell the detective everything you know about how the transfer was arranged, whose idea it was, who found my account, who hired Devin Alcott. All of it. Truthfully. That means testifying against Brandon. Yes. She was quiet again. I watched my daughter sit with the specific weight of the marriage she had built her identity around for 5 years and what it meant to dismantle it. What happens to me? She asked. That depends on what you cooperate with and what the investigation finds about the extent of your involvement. Susan believes that if you come forward voluntarily and fully, the criminal exposure for you is minimal. You are a co-signer on a document obtained through fraud. That's different from being the architect of the fraud. And you? What happens to us? I looked at my daughter. We find out who we are to each other on the other side of the truth. That's the only answer I have. Claire met with Detective Okafor the following Tuesday. Her attorney was present. She was cooperative and detailed and, from what Susan relayed to me, visibly shaken in a way that read as genuine. She provided text messages, emails, a voicemail in which Brandon coached her on how to present the hospital visit to me. She provided the contact information for Devin Alcott that she had received from Brandon's attorney. 2 weeks later, Brandon David Price was arrested at his Nashville office. The charges were elder financial exploitation, fraud, forgery, and conducting an unregistered securities offering. Susan told me that when the arresting detectives arrived, Brandon attempted to present a printed copy of the power of attorney as evidence of authorization, apparently unaware that Devin Alcott had already provided a full statement to investigators. The Fidelity funds were released back to my account the following month after the wire transfer was formally reversed. $242,618 returned to exactly where it had been. Susan filed a civil suit for attorney's fees, investigative costs, and damages. Brandon's attorney entered into negotiations almost immediately. I will not pretend the months that followed were easy. There is a particular grief in being right about someone in a way you desperately wished you were wrong about. Claire filed for divorce in April. She moved temporarily to her friend Rachel's apartment in Nashville while she sorted out where her life was going. She called me every Sunday, which was something she had not reliably done since before she married. The calls were shorter than they used to be and more careful, as if we were both learning a new register for talking to each other. In July, something happened that I had not anticipated and could not have planned for. A woman came to my door on a Wednesday afternoon. She was in her early 40s, well-dressed, with the kind of exhausted composure that comes from holding things together over a very long period. She introduced herself as Kendra Walsh. She said she had been one of the prospective investors Brandon had solicited for Price Wellness Capital Partners. She said she had given him $60,000. She said she had a 12-year-old daughter and that $60,000 was every dollar she had saved toward her daughter's college education. I invited Kendra inside. I made coffee. She told me that she had found me through the public records of the criminal case and that she was embarrassed to be here, but that she didn't know where else to turn. She had filed her own complaint but was told the criminal case against Brandon would move slowly and the civil recovery was uncertain. I called Susan that evening. Susan made some calls. Brandon's civil attorney, already under significant pressure from multiple directions, was suddenly very interested in reaching a global settlement that would address all claimants. Kendra Walsh received a full settlement offer for $60,000 the following October. She sent me a card with a photograph of her daughter, a girl with braids and a gap-toothed smile, holding a sign that said College Fund Restored. I put it on my refrigerator next to a drawing Emma had made for me, but I am getting ahead of myself again. The arraignment was in September. Brandon's attorney had spent the summer building a defense around Claire's involvement, suggesting she had been a co-architect of the scheme. This was the expected move, and Susan had anticipated it. Claire's cooperation in the timeline of Brandon's prior fraud in Chattanooga significantly undermined that framing. The judge, a woman named Patricia Hollins, reviewed the evidence with the patient attention of someone who had seen a great many variations of this particular story. When it was time for impact statements, I stood. "Your Honor," I said, "I am 63 years old. The money that was taken from me represents 30 years of classroom work. It represents every birthday gift I didn't buy for myself, every vacation I shortened, every luxury I declined. It is not abstract. It is specific and it is irreplaceable time. Brandon Price targeted me because he believed that my age and my affection for my daughter made me an easy mark. He was almost right about the second part. The first part turned out to be his miscalculation." I paused. I looked at my daughter, who was sitting in the third row. "I'm not asking for the maximum sentence. I'm asking for a sentence that reflects what was actually taken, not just from me, but from every person this man convinced to trust him. What I've learned is that the damage of financial fraud isn't only financial. It's the specific damage of having your judgment exploited, of being made to feel foolish for having trusted someone. I want that recognized." Judge Hollins sentenced Brandon Price to 4 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation, full restitution to all victims, and a permanent bar from serving as an officer or director of any Florida-registered investment entity. When the gavel came down, Claire, sitting 3 rows behind me, put her face in her hands. Not with relief. With something more complex than relief. The particular weight of watching the ending of a chapter you had written yourself into without fully understanding the genre. I found her in the hallway afterward. She looked up when she saw me. "Mom, I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said. "I know." We stood in the fluorescent courthouse hallway for a moment. "What do I do now?" she asked. The question was bigger than it sounded. "You start from where you actually are," I said, "not from where you thought you were. That's the only place you can start from." It is now a Saturday morning in November. I am on my back porch in Clearwater with coffee and the newspaper. The air is warm and the bougainvillea along the back fence is doing what it does in November, which is bloom with a recklessness that never fails to make me believe in resilience as a biological function. Joyce is coming over for lunch. Claire is driving down for Thanksgiving next week, her first time back in Florida since everything happened. We have spoken on the phone enough times by now that I believe the conversation we will have in person can hold what it needs to hold. I am not certain, but I am willing. I've been thinking lately about the 8 years I spent in litigation, reading documents that told stories people thought they had hidden. I left that work to raise a daughter, and I do not regret that. But I have come to believe that those years gave me more than professional skills. They gave me a particular refusal to look away from what documents actually say, from what actions actually mean, even when the person whose name appears in them is someone I love. My daughter made choices I would not have made. She told herself stories I would not have believed, and I pressed criminal charges against my own child's husband, while that child's name was still potentially in the complaint, because the alternative, pretending it hadn't happened, absorbing the loss, letting Brandon Price continue, was something I could not do without becoming someone Dennis would not have recognized. Dennis used to say that integrity isn't what you practice when it's easy. It's what you practice when the cost is real. The cost was real. My phone buzzes on the table. A text from Claire. "Leaving Nashville at 7 Thursday morning. Can I bring anything?" I type back, "Just yourself." That's enough. I put the phone down and look at the bougainvillea for a while. $242,000, returned to exactly where I put it. A daughter, slowly finding her way back. A woman named Kendra Walsh, whose daughter's college fund is whole again. At 63 years old, with the Florida sun already warm at 9 in the morning, I know this. I was not easy to exploit because I was strong. I was almost exploited because I loved my daughter. Those are two different things, and it took everything that happened for me to understand the distance between them. Real love means telling the truth even when the truth is ruinous. Real protection means holding a boundary even when crossing it would be easier, and the person asking you to cross it is someone whose face you have known since it was 5 minutes old. And the greatest thing Dennis ever taught me, without knowing he was teaching it, was this. The most dangerous thing you can be is someone that other people have decided is harmless. I refill my coffee. The bougainvillea keeps blooming. It is a very good morning.